the one who is truly free, is the one whose heart and his soul is free of these various desires, whether that be to do with wealth, whether that to be to do with status, whether that to be with the lusts and things like that. Then he is the one who is truly free, right? He is the free person, right? And in contrast, like if we look in the world today, we see that there are many people out there who appear they have fame, they have fortune, they have money, they're able to fulfill their lusts and desires. Like you see many of these, let's say, famous people and celebrities and things of that nature, and you see that they have all of the money, and they have cars, they have mansions, and they have audiences, and they have fans, and all of these types of things. But really, they are slaves. They are actually slaves. To us, in all appearances, it seems, wow, this man has, look at millions of people who love him and follow him, and look at all these cars and mansions, and this man, and you become amazed by looking. But the reality of it is that this what you are looking at here is actually a slave. This is a slave, right? A slave doesn't have to have, like you see the things that you put around the arms with chains, right? And likewise on the ankles, when they capture slaves in a battle or a war, and they put them in these iron chains and they drag them, right? A slave doesn't have to be a slave in physical shackles and chains, right? Because as you've seen and as you know from this book now, that there's a slavery of the heart, just like there is like a captivation of the body, right? And so these people that we are speaking of, they are slaves to, obviously, their desires. They are slaves for fame and fortune, right? They seek fame and fortune. And they are slaves to wealth, because they seek wealth. They are slaves to their lusts and desires. And they are not free. They are not free, right? They are actually in shackles. It's just that we can't see those shackles. And you will find that in reality, they actually have the most miserable of lives in reality, because the pleasures can only give you so much, right? And once you exhaust those pleasures, you don't really find any sakina, you don't find any tranquility, right? Tum'anina, you don't find any serenity in the heart, right? And this is what happens to these people. They actually live miserable lives. They have all these things, but they're actually lonely, right? And to escape that loneliness, they need more fame, more fortune, more possessions, more mansions, right? To make up for that destitution inside, right? That loneliness, that emptiness. So what you are seeing really in these types of characters is basically a slave, right? A lowly slave in shackles. And so that's why, we shouldn't be deceived by these appearances. And likewise, this is the type of tarbiyah, this is the type of nurturing that we have to give to our children and to the youth. Because obviously, being very impressionable and living in this type of society of materialism and consumerism and consumption, and it's very shallow and very fickle and things like that, they can get caught up in things and start seeing fame in this and pleasure in that and position in this, and to start making this their goal in life, right? This is how it happens. So you have to make them beware that the greatest quality that you can have is to be an abd of Allah, right? This is the greatest quality that you can have and that you can be, is to be an abd of Allah. This is what gives you status. This is what gives you true pleasure, right? The halawatul iman. This is what frees you and liberates you, right? But do not be a slave who is in the shackles of his desires, right? There's the shackles which are physical, of iron and things like that, but there are shackles which are the shackles of desires, And so as Shaykh al-Islam says that, he continues, and he says that basically a person then he takes his God as he takes his desire as his God, and he starts following his desires without guidance from Allah Azza wa Jal. He continues and he says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ خَالِصًا لِلَّهِ عَبْدًا لَهُ قَدْ صَارَ قَلْبُهُ مُعَبَّدًا لِرَبِّهِ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ بحيث يكون الله أحب إليه من كل ما سواه ويكون ذليلا له خاضعا وإلا استعبدته الكائنات واستولت على قلبه الشياطين وكان من الغاوين إخوان الشياطين وصار فيه من السوء والفحشاء ما لا يعلمه إلا الله وهذا أمر ضروري لا حيلة فيه. So basically this passage is kind of again summarizing the essence of what we mentioned. He said that whoever is not sincere to Allah and is not a servant of Allah, and his heart hasn't become humbled and subdued to his Lord alone, without any partners, right? In the sense that Allah is more beloved to him than everything else. And he is someone who humiliates and humbles himself to Allah. Right, so if the heart is not like this, then all of the creation will enslave him. And the devils will dominate his heart. And he will become from the misguided people, from the brethren of the devils. And there will occur within him such evil and such shameful deeds which no one knows except Allah. And this is an absolutely necessary affair. There is no escaping from it. Right? Meaning, so, in contrast to the heart that we were mentioning before, if your heart is like one of these types of hearts, absence of sincerity, you are not enslaved to Allah, you don't worship Him alone, Allah is not most beloved to you, right? Then, like if you haven't been enslaved, if you don't enslave yourself to Allah, then the other creation are going to come and do it, right? It's a bit like, for example, like if you have a cup and the cup isn't filled with what is wholesome and good, then it's going to be filled by other things by necessity. Someone else is going to come and do it, right? So in the same way, if your heart is not filled with sincerity and so on, then because with sincerity and servitude to Allah, do you gain true freedom, right? Freedom from actual slavery to your lusts and to desires and to the desires of men and the creation, right? They come and they dominate you, right? If you don't have this, then the creation is going to come and it's going to enslave you. The devils are going to come and they are going to dominate your heart, and you're going to be misguided, and you will find in your behavior as-su wal-fahsha and all these other things, right? Evil, shameful deeds. And so this is something that's absolutely necessary. It will most certainly happen. So then Shaykh al-Fawzan, he comments upon this and he says, whoever is not a servant to Allah, he will become a servant to his desires, and he will become a servant to shaitan, and he will become a servant to his lusts. And this is because a person is either an abd of Allah or he is an abd of other than him, right? It's not possible for him except to be a servant or a slave. Everybody is a servant or a slave. You can't remove that description from yourself. Right now you are a servant and a slave. But the issue is, to what are you a servant or a slave? So either you are a slave to Allah, or you are going to be a slave to something else by necessity. So whoever abandons uboodiyyah to Allah, right? So if you do not actualize this uboodiyyah in your heart, in your soul, in your speech, in your behavior, if you don't actualize it and make it real, then Allah is going to put you to trial by being enslaved and captivated by other things. By necessity, this will happen. And so for that reason, this is why you see, when you see the polytheists and the pagans, when they, abandoned servitude to Allah, what were they put to trial with? They were put to trial with so many different things, right? So some of them start worshipping the sun. Some of them start worshipping the moon. Some of them start worshipping the stars. Others start worshipping rocks. Others start worshipping trees. Others start worshipping, the phenomena. They see the phenomena, the wind, right? It's got power in it, so this must be a deity, right? The water, it's got the power through its flow. This must be a deity. Or they start worshipping everything, the cows, the animals and everything, right? So by necessity, false religion based upon worship of a other than Allah is going to arise, right? Because if you are not singling out Allah in worship and enslaved to Him, then you will be put to trial by other things, from idols, trees, stones, things like that. As Ibn al-Qayyim said, in a line of poetry, he said, هربوا من الرق الذي خلقوا له فبلوا برق النفس والشيطان. That they fled from the captivity for which they were created, but then they were put to trial by the captivity of the soul and the devil. Right? So if you flee from the captivity, meaning the uboodiyyah for which you were created, then you are going to be captivated by your soul and by the shaitan. Your soul, and then the shaitan who's going to come and dominate your soul. So, and ar-riq, this thing, ar-riq, which is captivity or slavery, it is servitude, right? And as the Shaykh says, when you are enslaved to Allah, this is true status, this is true nobility, this is true freedom. This is true freedom. True freedom is to be enslaved to Allah Azza wa Jal. And as for being enslaved to other than Allah, this is humiliation. This is utter humiliation, right? It's a bit like if you reflect upon the people of disbelief and the lands of disbelief, and you try to understand what's basically the structure of these societies that we are living in, that we observe, that we experience. And what you will find, what the reality is that there are some people amongst them who are the elites, right? They've realized that if we enslave people to their desires, then we can become rich on the back of that, and we can become powerful, right? So you see in these societies that there are some people who are making billions, for example, on the back of alcohol. Consumption of alcohol. Why? Because people following their desires will consume alcohol and so on and so forth. And, they make billions and billions by making people captivated and enslaved and addicted, right, to the pleasure of drinking alcohol. And then there will be other people who see that because people love frivolity, they like pastime, they like wasting their time, let's create multiple ways in which they can waste their time, right? Multiple sports, multiple frivolities, multiple different things, and create like a culture around it, and business models and so on and so forth. And so therefore you will see there are billions and billions that are being made out of sports. And then others will see there's billions to be made out of, for example, letting people have illicit relations, right? Unlawful relations. And so they will give them all the means and the tools to be able to do that. And they will make billions and billions and billions upon that. So what's happened here is that the people at large in a society have just become basically slaves to their desires, and people are becoming extremely rich and powerful on the back of people following those desires, right? So now when you come along, when a messenger amongst the messengers comes, or a prophet amongst the prophets comes, and he calls the people to be enslaved to Allah, not to their desires, not to their lusts, right? And to truly liberate them, right? We want to liberate you, right? Leave this slavery and these shackles that you are in. we want to liberate you with Islam, then what you find is that the greatest enemies are obviously these people who are benefiting from the following of desires. So these people become the greatest of enemies to the prophets, to the messengers, and likewise to the people who call to their way, right? So it's like, for example, when we call people in these societies who obviously are basically drowning in following their lusts and desires in so many different ways. They have so many shackles upon them, shackles of false belief, shackles of false philosophies, shackles of of drugs, of music, of entertainment, of wallowing in sports and things like that, and all in an unhealthy kind of way. And we try to save them from all of these perils and evils of these types of things. Then that means that someone somewhere is going to lose some status or some money or some wealth or some riches, right? It's a threat to them. So that's why they spread all of these lies and shubuhat about the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, that it is backward, and it is for the 7th century, and it is all the various other shubuhat that basically that are thrown. But from that you can see what true freedom is. It's the freedom of the heart, and that only comes by being enslaved to Allah Azza wa Jal, and that is by being sincere to Allah in one's deeds, singling Him out in worship, being sincere to Allah in his actions and deeds. And this is when a person receives true, genuine freedom, right? And this is when you receive true nobility. That's true nobility, sharaf. Right, that's true nobility, true freedom, hurriya. This is the true freedom, right? And all the other thing, that is basically just shackles and chains, even though we can't physically actually see that. And also we can see from this as well that a lot of these kind of mental illnesses that you see appearing in these types of materialist societies, it's a consequence of these shackles and slavery, right? That's where it's coming from, right? Because people are not feeling serenity in their hearts. They're not feeling satisfaction. They don't have a meaning and a purpose. They don't have a goal to seek in the hereafter. They don't know that they have a Lord. And in the absence of all of that, when they suffer the trials and tribulations and traumas and calamities and anxieties of life, they can't handle it. And then, these kind of mental illnesses start appearing because they can't make sense of the calamities which have come to them. So a lot of these kind of mental illnesses, they themselves are due to an absence of these things, absence of sincerity to Allah, absence of uboodiyyah to Allah, absence of love of Allah and His Messenger more than any other thing. So after that, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he goes on to explain that. In fact, what we'll do, we'll stop the lesson here because he brings like a new kind of related subject area, so I don't want to cut it halfway through. So what we'll do is we'll stop the lesson at this point, inshallah ta'ala. Basically, he moves on to the fitrah, the original state, the natural state upon which a person is created, and how the natural state of a heart is to be inclined towards Allah. Right? So he's going to bring that discussion into the discussion, inshallah. So what we'll do is we'll end the lesson here, and we'll continue the discussion in the next lesson. And so with that, we'll end today's lesson there. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.